Okay, we are live. Well, welcome everyone. Hello and happy Riḍván, and welcome to a live stream musical celebration of Riḍván in song and story. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you for connecting. It's great to be connected, and please do say hello in the YouTube chat. Let everyone know where you're watching from. It's always nice to know where people are tuning in from. And feel free to interact along the way in the YouTube chat. So we're going to go on a bit of a musical journey this evening through the story of the festival of Riḍván. And I know that many of you watching will probably know this story, but I hope you'll be happy to hear it again, especially today when we're celebrating the first day of Riḍván. But for anybody who is perhaps not familiar with the festival of Riḍván, Riḍván means paradise. And the festival of Riḍván is really the biggest festival of the year for Baha'is around the world. And it's essentially the celebration of the day, the moment when the Baha'i faith began. It's that moment on April 21st, 1863, when Bahá'u'lláh, the founder of the Baha'i faith, he announced that he was the promised one awaited by the world's great religions, and that he had come to bring a message of unity. So it's a very joyful celebration of that day and of all the potential infused into that day for future generations to come. But Riḍván, the festival of Riḍván itself actually goes on for 12 days. I'm just seeing your messages coming in. Great to have you. Great to have you all. Wonderful to be with you all. So the festival of Riḍván goes on for 12 days from April 21st to May 2nd. And so before we begin our story, I wanted to let you all know that for the 12 days of Riḍván, I'm hosting a daily online gathering on Zoom called Garden of Paradise. And Garden of Paradise is a very simple daily devotional meeting where anyone is welcome to come along and share a prayer or a song or a reading, anything that inspires them, anything of their own choice, or just simply come along and listen. And so the Garden of Paradise devotional gathering will be happening every day, twice a day, for the next 12 days in celebration of Riḍván. And it takes place every day at 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. GMT. That's the time zone here in Dublin. So whatever time that is in your time zone, you're very welcome to come along anytime. And we had our first one earlier today, just a few hours ago. And the second Garden of Paradise Zoom gathering is actually going to be immediately after this live stream. So as we get to the end of our story, anyone who would like to is very welcome to come on over to the Zoom gathering for about 20 minutes to just spend the time together saying prayers, singing songs together after the story is finished. So I'll let you know when it's time to move over to Zoom for anyone who would like to. But speaking of gardens, I thought I would set the tone for today's journey by singing a song about gardens. This is a piece that is based on a beautiful, short, poetic verse from the writings of Bahullah about the most important garden, which is the garden of the human heart. And it's really about the importance of taking care of that garden. So I will sing this verse, and then we will set out together for about the next hour on a musical journey through the story of Riḍván. This is called Garden of Thy Heart. Oh friend, oh friend, in the garden of thy heart plant not but the rose of love. and from the nightingale of affection and desire, loosen not thy hold. Treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly. Treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly. In the garden of thy heart, plant not but the rose of love. So, just to center our thoughts before we set out on this musical journey together, I just wanted to briefly draw our attention to the image in this verse that I just sang, this image of a rose being planted in a garden. And I think it's a very simple but very memorable image, because the image of a rose usually brings to mind the idea or a sense of beauty. But the rose of love adds this other dimension and suggests maybe something about inner beauty. We might call spiritual beauty, the beauty of a person's soul, the beauty of a person's spirit. And it even perhaps provokes a question: what does it mean to be inwardly beautiful? What does it mean to have a beautiful heart? What does it mean to be spiritually beautiful? And I wonder if we might just take this question and just tuck it away in the back of our minds as we venture through this musical journey through the story of Riḍván. So, to begin this journey, I firstly want to invite you all, wherever you're watching from, whether you're watching from your living rooms or your kitchen tables, I want to invite you to close your eyes for a moment and use your imagination. And we're going to travel back in time. We're going to travel about 200 years back in time to the middle of the 19th century, which was really one of the in many ways, one of the most pivotal centuries in human history, because in the 19th century, the Western world was on the brink of a technological revolution that was going to forever change how human beings communicate with each other. And of course, this all began with the invention of the telegraph, which was then followed by the invention of the telephone and the radio and the television and now the internet. And well, now here we all are, connected together, communicating from all over the planet. And it's almost as if we're sitting in the same room. Well, parallel to this technological revolution that was being ignited in the Western Hemisphere, another kind of revolution was taking place in the Eastern Hemisphere, and that was a kind of spiritual revolution, or we might say revelation, which was being led by a very mild-mannered, softly spoken youth in Iran, or in Persia, as it was known at the time. And this youth, this young man in Persia, was teaching people that humanity as a whole was in fact entering a new stage of its history, not just technologically, but also spiritually, and that the ancient promises of the great religions of the world, promises concerning the end of the world and the beginning of a new world, were going to begin their fulfillment in the 19th century. And the manner, he said, in which these ancient promises were going to be fulfilled was through the appearance of a great, divinely inspired teacher, that great promised one who is expected and anticipated by all of the great religions of the world. And of course, this notion of a great figure who is to come in the future and to bring about some great transformation of the world, this notion is somewhat mysteriously shared by just about all of the great spiritual traditions of the world. And this young man in Persia called himself the Bab, which means the gate, as if he were the gate to this promised one who was soon to appear. And the Bab whipped up this whirlwind of excitement all over his country. Thousands and thousands of people started to listen to the Bab and to prepare themselves for the coming of this promised one that he kept on talking about. And very quickly, the authorities in Persia, both the religious and civil authorities, became extremely threatened by the seemingly unstoppable influence of this young man. Even though the Bab was only in his 20s, he had no political power, he was a humble merchant, and yet his message was turning the entire nation upside down. And in their fear, in their panic, the Persian authorities unleashed this tsunami of persecution against the Bab and his followers. The Bab himself was publicly executed on the orders of the Shah, the king of Persia. And in the space of a few short years, over 20,000 people, men, women, children, anyone who had dared to listen to the message of the Bab, were ruthlessly slaughtered on the streets of Persia in the mid-19th century. But until his last breath, the Bab remained utterly, serenely confident that he had accomplished his purpose. He had paved the way and had prepared the people for the coming of the promised one. And so I'd like to now sing some words written by the Bab in which he gives to his followers, who were known as Babis, he gives to the Babis an aspiration. The highest aspiration, he said, that they could aim at was to attain the presence of the promised one and to hear his words, his verses, his teachings, and to put those teachings into practice in their own lives. This is called Wondrous Paradise. There is no paradise more wondrous. There is no paradise more wondrous for any soul than to be exposed to God's manifestation in his day, to hear his verses and believe in them. is no paradise more wondrous. There is no paradise more wondrous for any soul than to be exposed to God's manifestation in His day, to hear His verses and believe in them. There is no paradise more wondrous. There is no paradise more wondrous to attain His presence, which is naught but the presence of God, to sail upon the sea of the heavenly kingdom of His good pleasure, and to partake of the choice fruits of the paradise of His divine oneness. There is no paradise more wondrous. There is no paradise more wondrous for any soul than to be exposed to God's manifestation in His day, to hear His verses and believe in them. And so this technological revolution was kicking off in the Western world. And at the same time, this great spiritual revelation was taking place in the Middle Eastern world with this young Persian man known as the Bab, the Gate, at the forefront of it. But the Bab had been publicly executed on the orders of the Shah of Persia. And really, to all outward appearances, it seemed as though the Bab's message was a lost cause. To any onlooker, it really appeared as though the Bab's whole life had ended in utter failure. His followers had been decimated by the thousands, and those who survived fell into a state of confusion and despair. Some of them renounced their faith in the Bab, some of them went into hiding or fled in fear, and some of them were arrested, imprisoned, and eventually banished from their homeland, sent into exile, never to return. And among those followers of the Bab who were sent into exile was a family. And in this family was a man, a husband and father, who from early on had been one of the stoutest, most capable and really most fearless champions of the Bab's message, and who for that reason had on a number of occasions been attacked, beaten, arrested, imprisoned, and now ultimately expelled from his homeland. And his name was Bahá'u'lláh, which means the glory of God. But in the context of our question that we're carrying in our minds, our theme, the theme of our journey, This name Baha'u'lláh is also sometimes translated as the splendor or beauty of God. And the place to which Baha'u'lláh and his family and their fellow followers of the Bab were exiled was the city of Baghdad in what is now modern-day Iraq. And Baghdad was a very interesting city because at a certain point in its history, many centuries before, Baghdad had really been something like the Paris or the New York City of the Middle East. It had really been this incredibly vibrant center of culture and philosophy and science and art and education. Now, by the time the 19th century rolled around, and when Baha'u'lláh and his family arrived in Baghdad, the city had lost that spark it had once had. It was no longer that beacon of light it had once been, and it had fallen into a state of relative decline. But it was still a city in which at least Baha'u'lláh and the other exiles could at least find some respite from the persecution they were facing back home in Persia. And in some respects, they could start anew. And from the moment that he arrived in Baghdad, all the while taking care of his family, raising his young children, helping them to find their feet in this new life of exile far from home, Baha'u'lláh began to take certain measures to revive the message of the Bab. He urged his fellow Babis to not lose their faith, but to be assured that when the time was right, the promised one would appear. And he became this tremendous source of optimism and confidence for his fellow exiles. It was almost as though he took command of a ship whose captain had been killed, and he began to steer that ship through the stormy weather and get it back on course to its destination. And one of the ways in which he did this was through the power of the written word, through his writings. And from the moment that he arrived in Baghdad as an exile, Baha'u'lláh began to produce this overflowing stream of creative, inspired writings. The words just seemed to flow out of his mind into books and letters and prayers and poems, and these writings became a great source of solace and strength for his fellow exiles. His words became to them almost like little stars shining in the darkness of the nighttime sky, like little constellations of wisdom and vision and direction that could help them navigate their way through this storm of confusion and chaos and despair that they were facing. And so for the next song, I'd like to sing some of these writings of Baha'u'lláh. This is one of my favorite passages in which Baha'u'lláh offers some words of encouragement to his fellow exiles. And this is called Sorrow Not. Sorrow not if in these days and on this earthly plane things contrary to your wishes have been ordained and manifested by God for days of blissful joy, of heavenly delight, are assuredly in store for you. Worlds holy and spiritually glorious will be unveiled to your eyes. You are destined destined by him in this world and hereafter to partake of their benefits, to share in their joys and obtain a portion of their sustaining grace. To each and every one of them you will no doubt attain. To each and every one of them you will no doubt attain. To each and every one of them you will no doubt attain. And so these words, these writings of this exiled follower of the Bab, Bahá'u'lláh, started to spread around, first around the city of Baghdad and then all over Iraq, and soon enough these writings were spreading like wildfire all over the Middle East, which at that time was largely under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, one of the biggest empires in the history of the world. And these writings started to exert an influence not only on Baha'u'llah's fellow Babis, but also on society at large, because Baha'u'lláh was not merely, he was not only helping to put back together the broken spirit of his fellow exiles, he was involving himself fully in broader society. For example, he was helping Muslims to become better Muslims, Christians to become better Christians, Jews to become better Jews. And many local politicians in Baghdad were becoming astonished at the changes they were witnessing in the behavior of their citizens towards one another. And in fact, the governor of Baghdad himself became completely enamored with this so-called criminal who had been dumped in his city, despised and rejected by his homeland. And over a period of 10 years, this steadily rising crescendo of public prestige began to surge around Baha'u'lláh. People of every strata of life that you could imagine, merchants, farmers, philosophers, artists, poets, politicians, even princes from around the empire, began flocking to Baghdad to witness with their own eyes how this city was just being electrified through the influence of this man who, to everyone's knowledge, was nothing more than a follower of the Bab. And yet it seemed as if he were accomplishing what throughout human history had always seemed like the impossible task. He was uniting people who for thousands of years had seen each other as enemies. He was somehow bringing about a change in people's perception of each other. He was teaching people, for example, that when, say, a Jew loves Moses, what they love is the spiritual beauty of Moses. When a Christian loves Jesus, what they love is the spiritual beauty of Jesus. When a Muslim loves Muhammad, what they love is the spiritual beauty of Muhammad. The same goes for a Buddhist's love for the Buddha, or a Zoroastrian's love for Zoroaster, a Hindu's love for Krishna, or the list of examples goes on and on. But just by orienting people's vision towards the spiritual beauty at the heart of all of the great prophets and divine messengers of history, he was creating harmony among the people. He was also introducing ideas and teachings that were very radical for the time and the society in which he was living. For example, he was promoting the advancement of women's rights and was fearlessly asserting, in his own words, that women and men have been and will always be equal in the sight of God. He was laying out how the economic problems of the world can best be addressed by examining the underlying spiritual problems causing them, and by posing questions about what is truly of value in life. He was also insisting that religion and science must go hand in hand in order for human civilization to progress in a healthy way. And above all, he was teaching people that humanity is one. In practical terms, he was telling people that the well-being of mankind, its peace and security, are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. So, in brief, he was teaching people to be united. And after 10 years of witnessing and really of participating in this extraordinary social, spiritual transformation of their city, the people of Baghdad received a devastating blow. In the springtime of 1863, a royal decree arrived from the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, one of the most despotic rulers in the world, ordering that Baha'u'lláh and his family were to be permanently banished from Baghdad and were to be summoned to Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, where Baha'u'llah's influence could be kept in check by the Sultan himself. And of course, for the followers of the Bab, nothing could have been more disastrous. Their leader, the Bab, had been killed. The promised one had not appeared. And their friend, Baha'u'lláh, who having lifted them up out of this abyss of confusion and despair, had become their one last hope. And now he was being taken away. And really, for them, the removal of Baha'u'lláh was the removal of hope. But as the people of Baghdad counted down the days until his departure, Baha'u'lláh himself remained in a state of total composure. He continued to write, he continued to teach, he continued to spend time with the poor, with the sick, with anyone who was grappling with a problem that they couldn't solve. And he urged people to practice patience in the face of this great crisis, and to trust that in the end all would be well. So I'd like to now sing another verse from Baha'u'llah's writings about patience in times of trial. This is called The Sign of Love. O Son of Man, for everything there is a sign. The sign of love is fortitude. The sign of love is patience. Under my decree, and under my trials, under my decree, under my trials. O Son of Man, for everything is a sign, the sign of love is fortitude. The sign of love is patience. Under my decree and under my trials, under my decree and under my trials. And so, this great crisis, the forced removal of Bahá'u'lláh from their city, really just broke the hearts of the people of Baghdad. It shattered their hopes. It seemed as if the very fabric that was holding their society together was unraveling before their eyes. But there was something deeper that was going on, that was really at the root of their heartbreak. Something that was beyond any concern for social stability or civic harmony. There was something deeply personal had taken a hold of their hearts. And that something was being torn away from them. And I think that what happened was something like this. You know, if you meet someone who becomes to you a source of warmth and wisdom and understanding, someone who sees you clearly enough to see the truth of you and who honors the truth of you, you probably like that person. And if that person offers to you insights and wise things that help you to navigate whatever challenges your life throws at you, you probably like that person a little bit more. And if that person somehow draws out all the best parts of you and actually empowers you to become a better person, you will probably want to spend as much time as you possibly can in the presence of that person. And so I wanted to just briefly share a description of something of the experience of the people of Baghdad during this time when Baha'u'lláh was living among them as an exile in their city. This comes from God Passes by Shoghi Effendi. Many and moving are the testimonies of bystanders who were privileged to gaze on his countenance or overhear his remarks as he moved through the lanes and streets of the city or paced the banks of the river. Of the mendicant, the sick, the aged, and the unfortunate, whom he succored, healed, supported, and comforted. Of the merchant, the artisan, and the shopkeeper, who waited upon him and supplied his daily needs. Of his adversaries, who were confounded or disarmed by the power of his utterance and the warmth of his love. So intoxicated were those who had quaffed from the cup of Baha'u'llah's presence, that in their eyes the palaces of kings appeared more ephemeral than a spider's web. And one prince who came to Baghdad and visited Baha'u'llah on several occasions remarked, "I know not how to explain it. Were all the sorrows of the world to be crowded into my heart, they would, I feel, all vanish when in the presence of Baha'u'llah. It is as if I had entered paradise itself." And so, all of his social teachings aside, all of his beautiful poetic writings aside, it was actually the personal effect that Baha'u'llah had had on the individual lives of the people of Baghdad that was really the true cause of their heartbreak at the prospect of his departure. And there was actually one city minister who was so distressed by what was happening and who felt so powerless before the decree of the Sultan that he decided to provide for Baha'u'llah a large space in the city, an open-air, outdoor space, so that the people of the city could come and meet with Baha'u'llah one last time to say their final goodbye. And that space was a beautiful, finely cultivated rose garden on the banks of the river that runs through Baghdad, a garden which is known today as the Garden of Riḍván, or the Garden of Paradise. And on the day of Baha'u'llah's departure from the city, crowds gathered in his neighborhood by the thousands from all over the city. People were climbing up on the rooftops just to get one last glimpse of him as he stepped out of his house for the last time. Children were running up to him, weeping, pulling at his clothes, begging him not to leave their city. And from his doorstep, Baha'u'llah called out to the crowds, and he told them that he was entrusting into their hands the well-being of their city, and he urged them to take care of each other. And then he invited all of them to come and visit with him over the following 12 days in the Garden of Riḍván. And you can imagine how this garden must have looked. It was late April, it was the height of spring. You can probably imagine the roses in bloom, the lawns vibrant green, the birds singing in the trees. And when he arrived in the garden, Baha'u'llah and his companions pitched a tent, and he lived there for 12 days so that the people of the city could come and say their last goodbye. But on the first of those 12 days, which is today, April 21st, 1863, Baha'u'llah did something which, like an alchemical reaction, transmuted the heartbreak of the people into uncontainable joy. He gathered his friends around him in the garden, and he revealed to them a secret that he had kept all his life, a secret that many of his close friends had already silently guessed. He told them that he was the one foretold by the Bab and promised by all of the great religions of the world. He was the promised one, and humanity's long wait was finally over. And he told the people that he was going to deliver to the world a new message, a revelation that would provide humanity with the tools necessary to build universal peace and to bring the whole world together as one united family. And so I'd like to now sing one of Baha'u'llah's prayers for world unity. This is called The Light of Unity. God grant that the light of unity and that the seal, the kingdom is God's, may be stamped upon the brow of all its people. God grant that the light of unity may envelop the whole earth, and that the seal, the kingdom is God's, may be stamped upon the brow of all its people. 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 And so, on April 21st, 1863, in this rose garden in Baghdad, Baha'u'lláh revealed to the people that he was the promised one, foretold by the Bab, awaited by all the great world religions. And he declared his purpose to build unity. And the people came in waves from all over the city to come to the garden, not only to say goodbye to Baha'u'lláh, but also to experience this transmutation of their sorrow into happiness. And for the following 12 days, the people had a festival in the garden of Riḍván to celebrate the fulfillment of the ancient promises of God and the beginning of a new time and a new world. And on the 12th day, as Baha'u'lláh departed from the garden of Riḍván, he was given what can only be described as a royal farewell. The people presented him with a beautiful red roan stallion, along with an entire caravan of horses and provisions for his family and government escorts to accompany him all the way to Constantinople. And all this had actually been arranged by the governor of Baghdad himself, who wanted to ensure that Baha'u'lláh would leave the city in a way that would honor the contributions that he had made to their society. And you know, I think that the manner in which Baha'u'lláh left Baghdad on that 12th day of Riḍván was really a reflection of the effect that he had had on the lives of the people. Because 10 years earlier, he had arrived in their city as a criminal. And through his warmth, his wisdom, his love, his understanding, his creativity, he had won their hearts, and he left like a king. And that is the story of Riḍván. And you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, the story of Riḍván is really just the story of the moment, the day when the Baha'i faith began, when Baha'u'lláh declared who he was. And so, of course, the whole story of Riḍván is really just the opening chapter of a much bigger story that bursts out of the initial scene of the garden and the city of Baghdad, and encompasses a huge number of different people and different countries and different cultures, and eventually reaches to the most powerful kings and queens and presidents and emperors of the world, both in the East and the West. But that story is beyond the scope of today. So I wanted to bring our Riḍván story to a close with one last song. But before I do that, I wanted to just briefly return to that initial question that we looked at the very beginning. That question about what is it that makes a person inwardly beautiful or spiritually beautiful? What does it mean to be spiritually beautiful? And maybe we probably all have different ideas about what that means. But as I was thinking about the Riḍván story and thinking about this question, it occurred to me that perhaps the person who is spiritually beautiful is that person who brings out the spiritual beauty in the people around them. And that is what Bahullah had done for the people of Baghdad. He had taught them to see themselves as noble and valuable and worthy of being treated with dignity. He had taught them to have faith both in the goodness of God and also to have faith in humanity's capacity and potential for good. He told people to think of every human being, in his own words, as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. But perhaps most importantly, he had guided people back to the most important part of their own selves, their heart. And I think that in doing that, he showed us the essence of spiritual beauty. And so with that in mind, I would like to bring our story to a close by sharing with you one brief quotation about the heart, which will segue into the last prayer of our story, which will then segue into the Garden of Paradise devotional gathering on Zoom. So what I would like to do is I would like to simply invite any of you who would like to come to the Zoom gathering, where we'll have about 20-30 minutes of time together to say some prayers together, perhaps sing some more songs. For anyone who would like to join that Zoom meeting, you can go ahead and you can click the Zoom link, which is in the YouTube description just below this live stream. And if you click that Zoom link, you will be transferred over to the waiting room of the Garden of Paradise Zoom meeting. And my friend Gregory will be there to let you in. And I'll be there. And I am going to switch over now so that I'll be in both YouTube Live and I'll also be in the Garden of Paradise Zoom meeting. So the only thing I need to tell you is that it's very important, if you do come into the Zoom meeting, it's very important that you, once you're in the Zoom meeting, close YouTube, because if you have both Zoom and YouTube open at the same time, you'll have double audio. So it's just important that you, if you come into the Zoom meeting, just close YouTube. But also, if you prefer not to come into the Zoom meeting, just feel free to stay and listen to the end, until the end on YouTube. So here we go. This prayer will be the last prayer of our Riḍván story and the first prayer of our Garden of Paradise. So Gregory, you can go ahead and welcome people into the meeting. And after I finish this last piece, I will say goodbye and move over to the Zoom room, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. So thank you all for coming with me on this journey. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was uplifting for you, and I hope it was an enjoyable way to celebrate the first day of Riḍván. God has given man a heart, and the heart must have some attachment. We have proved that nothing is completely worthy of our heart's devotion save reality, for all else is destined to perish. Therefore, the heart is never at rest and never finds real joy and happiness until it attaches itself to the eternal. How foolish the bird that builds its nest in a tree that may perish, when it could build its nest in an ever-verdant garden of paradise. Create in me a pure heart, oh my God, oh my God, and renew a tranquil conscience within me, oh my hope, through the Spirit power, confirm thou me in thy cause. O my best beloved, confirm thou me in thy cause, and by the light of thy glory reveal unto me thy path. By the light of thy glory reveal unto me thy path. O thou, the goal of my desire, and through the power of thy transcendent might, lift me up unto the heaven of thy holiness, O source of my being, and by the breezes of thine eternity gladden me, O thou who art my God. Let thine everlasting melodies breathe tranquility on me, O my companion. Let the riches of thine ancient countenance deliver me from all except thee, O my Master, O my Master, and let the tidings of the revelation of thine incorruptible essence bring me joy. O thou who art the most manifest of the manifest, and the most hidden of the hidden, the most manifest of the manifest and the most hidden of the 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 hidden.